The smell of old apartment buildings and their aged wood and dusty railings marked a welcome change to my surroundings. I loved everything about the Bronx and couldn't understand why my parents would ever trade in the hustle and bustle of city life for Long Island. The walls of my grandparents' apartment were lined with old family photographs. Baby pictures of my grandfather that I thought were funny because he was wearing a dress, and old photos of people who had died long before I was born, taken in countries I had never given much thought to. My favorite pictures were my grandparents' wedding photos. My grandmother had been the great beauty of our family. Alabaster skin, thick black hair that had always been worn in a bob just above her shoulders, and a round face that made her look like a real-life version of Snow White. My grandfather was tall and skinny. His olive skin tone and dark hair made him look more Italian than Jewish. He looked nothing like the blind, round-bellied, pale man that I had known. My grandfather had died a few months earlier. When he was alive, he would sing me Louis Armstrong songs while teaching me to cook. He told me, "If a starfish cuts off a finger, it will grow back. But you are not a starfish, and you have to be very careful with knives because your fingers won't grow back." Taking care of Grandma's foot should have been his job. There weren't many pictures of my mom on the wall of pictures, which I always felt slightly cheated by. This seemed to only support my mother's argument that her parents never particularly cared much for her, a fact that I had adamantly decided not to accept. Whenever the opportunity arose, I attempted to pester my mom into liking Grandma, and Grandma into saying nice things about my mom. It seemed beyond my understanding that a mother and a daughter could not love one another. Parents loved their kids. Kids love their parents. That seemed like a universal truth. But according to my mom, it didn't always work that way. My mother was left alone for most of her childhood. She remembers being handed a box of cereal and told to watch TV and not bother anyone, or being kicked out of the house to go play in the streets when she was barely out of diapers. When she broke her collarbone on the way to school when she was 5, she listened to the school nurse berate my grandmother for not deeming it important to come pick her daughter up and take her to a doctor. Grandma told the nurse my mom could walk home after school and she would deal with the problem then. But the biggest area of neglect in my mother's upbringing was her back. During a routine doctor visit when she was 7 years old, the family doctor informed my grandparents that their daughter had already started to show strong curvatures in her spine. In order to lead a normal life, they were told, my mother would need to be fitted for a back brace immediately to help contain her scoliosis while her tiny body grew. They refused. My mother grew up, but not much. Her S-shaped spine, if stretched out, would have her measure at 5 feet 8 inches, the same height as her nearly identical younger sister. Instead, she's 4'9". As a result of her curved spine, my grandfather would tell her during her teenage years that no decent man will ever want you. She set out to prove him right, dating one bad boy after another, even marrying one at 18 just to get out of the house. Her ill-fated first marriage was annulled within a year, more proof to her family that she was a screw-up. My grandparents' apartment wasn't tidy by any stretch of the imagination, but it was less messy than our house, and therefore clean by default. I slept in the room my mom had shared with my aunt until she left home, and my mom slept on the couch in the living room. There was a third bedroom in the apartment, but it was full to the brim with things no one used. It didn't strike me as odd that my grandparents had a junk room. There were plenty of rooms in our house we didn't use. Despite the cool climate between her and my mother, I liked Grandma. She read the newspaper to me every day. One day she read me the story of a girl my age who had fallen down an elevator shaft not far from where Grandma lived and had died. I made her read the story to me over and over again. "Do you enjoy this?" my grandmother asked me. No. I did, though. I was fascinated by the idea that someone my age could die, but I didn't want to tell her that. I liked our daily newspaper reading, and I didn't want her to stop. I was used to hearing the news on the radio and loved having it told to me like a story, curled up against her on her bed. At lunchtime, she would make us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on cinnamon raisin bread. PB&J was a favorite food of hers, but neither of her children had liked it, so my grandmother had waited until she was well into her 60s to have someone in the family to share it with. Unlike my mom, Grandma always wore lipstick.